Okay, we are live.
All right, thank you, Sarah. We're going to go ahead and start this meeting moving forward, this Public Safety Special Committee working group. All council members are here except for, well, Councilman Neal is present. So first, can I get approval of October 7th, our working group minutes, please?
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion. Can I get a second? I'll second that motion. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right. I don't know if Councilman Neal voted or not. I know he's on mute. So well, moving forward, we're going to go ahead and get started. We do have the interns with us, Shelby and Trayvon. What I'm going to do is sometimes with our city council meetings, we have the little system where you can push and raise your hand. I'm just going to, since there's only a few of us, just go ahead and wave your hand and I'll call on you or whatever moving forward in case our interns have any questions or comments. So moving forward, we do have a presentation today, and I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Farrar, and he can start that.
Yeah, how you doing, Councilman Kamer? Thank you for having us back again. I brought one of my good friends, Engelbert, down here on the very bottom of your screen. He works for City IT, and he wants to give you some information about, you know, our servers and our networking and like firewall and some of those higher level IT things. And that's why he's the guest expert on those topics.
All right, sounds good.
Cool. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get going. So hopefully you can see my screen now. PowerPoint background, City of Akron, infrastructure assessment and strategy. You see that? Super, awesome. So I'm the IT infrastructure manager for the City of Akron, and you know, I work with public safety, the City of Akron, as well as water reclamation and water plant. So I will go ahead and tell you that I wanted to give you guys a little bit throwback. Public safety, when you know, we started this kind of you know, reassessment. Public safety had servers that were serving you know, public needs. That you know, at that point in time, the Billboard top hits was you know, Britney Spears' Toxic. And it would have placed it essentially at iPhone -3, and the top selling phone was a Razr back then. So we know that definitely technology had changed a lot over time. So when we looked at it, at first we said, okay, well, when we're doing this refresh, what needs refreshed? And we essentially had 2 City of Akron data centers and 2 public safety data centers that needed refreshed. Old hardware failing. We really never had a comprehensive refresh across the entire city. And so as we started to dig through that, we started to really evaluate all of the servers and systems that were on that, you know, throughout those data centers. And when we did this comprehensive evaluation, we looked at the load and the requirements of the different applications over time. So we looked at, you know, how many people are using it, and you know, at what times do we see the greatest load, and what is that? The considerations that we looked at were the age of the individual systems. We looked at the sheer number of systems, and really also who supported those systems, because we have systems that are really supported internally by IT as well as external partners. We really looked under a fine tooth the CPU usage over time, as well as the storage, the usage and the requirements, as well as retention, and how much of that actually was being changed over time. So when we looked at things, we said, you know what, we want to go to the cloud. That's going to make more sense. You know, some of us came from backgrounds where we were with, you know, tech firms and highly, you know, quick growing entities, and we know that we used cloud quite a bit. We looked at just the storage and without looking at the amount of compute, because whenever you're looking at cloud storage, or I should say cloud services, you have a couple of components. You have the storage, where you're just putting stuff out there, but then you're also looking at the compute where you have the transactions and all the calculations happen. When we just looked at that calculation for storage, we came back with $135,000 a year, and we're like, wow, that's a lot just to manage storage. And the problem is that whenever you're going to the cloud, you also have to license the compute. And we are in a heavily Windows environment. So we'd have to still purchase the compute, and we'd have to have those machines on 24/7. And then we'd also have to license the operating system on there, right? And we also had a lot of legacy applications. And so one problem that cloud services provided to us is that it was very difficult for us to predict the usage. And if it's hard to predict the usage, then it's really hard to predict those costs. And we had a lot of systems and data that was potentially at rest, not really doing anything, just because we had data retention or FOIA requirements and things like that, that we had to hold on. So the problem is that really the cloud priced itself out. So we started to look at a couple options of, are we going to rent? Are we going to lease? Or are we going to buy? And oftentimes that we know that buying is clear cut. And whenever you're renting something or leasing something, someone else is putting up and fronting that money. And then there's that cost of funds over time. And essentially they basically sell it back to you in bits and bytes in a financial model. And so we said, we're going to give it a shot, or we're going to go ahead and do some of this. But then we also looked at a couple of vendors, Lenovo, IBM, HP, Dell, Cisco. And from a rent perspective, we actually looked at Involta just down the street. So one of the things that we did is we took Involta's offerings, which was essentially they purchased the hardware. They're going to go and kind of sell it back to us over time. And we're going to rent. And this is almost kind of like that hybrid of, it's not necessarily a cloud because it's in someone else's data center, but someone else is going to manage it, and we're going to just make payments towards that. And so what we also did is, and initially in the project, we said that 36 months is too short of a time period for us to jump onto a platform and then move back, because by the time that we really get comfortable, we're going to have to go and switch back, or we really wanted to have a commitment of 5 years to this. And so we were looking at 60-month numbers. And so whenever we looked at Involta, unfortunately, that number for that rent scenario looked like it was going to be about $938,000. So what we actually did is then we said, okay, what's going to happen if we just buy it? And so you can kind of see that in each data center, we had public safety. That was going to be basically a $153,000 investment. And another solution that we had was this vSAN was $238,000. And then the city of Akron would have to have an investment of $212,000. And another option was $370,000, right? But what we also noticed is that over time, that if we simply combine data centers by taking the resources that we have, the money and the pool of money that we have to work with, that we're actually getting a savings of, in one scenario you see here is $58,000 savings of kind of working together. And that's my better together column. And even if we went and got the Cadillac of what we were looking at, we would save $155,000. So if anything, when we're looking at the data center refresh, our savings were not necessarily cloud-based or rent-based or buying it. It was really pulling together and looking at city resources and public safety resources and be able to have one data center that's going to be refreshed. So we also brought in Dell and Cisco, looked at those on total costs, and everything from a buy perspective was reasonable. sometimes vendors would work with you and try to, kind of undersize purposely so that they would get a better number. At the end of the day, we were really faced with, are we going to rent or are we going to buy? Because everything was really within 15% with amongst each other from a buy perspective. So we looked at the costs and we determined that we're better off buying. And we actually, over 60 months, by prepaying the support and the maintenance and all those items, that we're probably going to go ahead and easily save 33% over renting something. And the other nice thing is that we have, we ensured that we had the capacity was in excess of what we really needed at this point in time. So the rent option would have actually cost us over time if we had any growth in it. So we went ahead and we executed, with Dell, purchased, refreshed the servers over at Involta, and we didn't necessarily, we had space at Involta, and the reason why we picked Involta is that we already had City Fiber over there. We already had a great relationship. We just didn't choose to go and rent systems from them. And so really the strategy that was set forth was, we're going to have this consolidation of data centers, and that's going to provide the ability that we're going to implement this feature-rich system for both public safety and the city of Akron that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to achieve. And on top of that, we're going to also be able to invest in security that allows not only public safety and city to reside on that, but also improves our security posture as opposed to the breach that we had a couple years ago. And the hope is that we're going to go and invest in this one last data center refresh, and we're going to target for 60 years of use. We're going to be flexible and allow ourselves to look at applications moving forward based off of their merits, not necessarily if they're in the cloud or on premise or who's managing those. And so hopefully, this puts the city at, in the best shape. So again, we're flexible with SaaS-based applications, cloud-based and on-prem. And so the hope is that we're gonna make that purchase. We're gonna retrench in what we're good for. We're IT guys. We're not necessarily data center folks, right? And who's better to manage security of servers and systems? It's folks in the data center. Who's best to manage the power requirements, having generators and things like that? It's the data center. So we're like, okay, we're going to go and leave that data center up to Involta to manage that for us. What we did is then we took the savings and invested it into our networking so that we can enable better services. And it just so happens to kind of land on our lap that COVID happened in a good time for us, where we were still able to deliver services. We could still have people work from home. We were able to manage through a lot of the complex problems where even if it was a year before that, we would have been really in a world of hurt. And one of the things that cloud services really relies on, as well as 365, other SaaS-based applications, is that you have to have that awesome connection to the internet. We have to have that awesome connectivity between buildings, for services and things like that. And we didn't necessarily have that. It's easy to do that at home when you just have a router and you have just one Wi-Fi and get that going. But from a city, to achieve that on a wide scale over the entire campus environment is really hard to achieve. And what we did is we focused on that. So our strategy and plans for 2021 is that we focus on disaster recovery, that we're going to hope to move to cloud-based backup for critical systems. And we're hoping that we'll be able to then enable the city to take advantage of those cloud systems for short durations during an emergency, breaches, mass catastrophe, perhaps even the loss of our primary data center. And our hope also is to evaluate our systems, whether it's a Workday, look at those individually, look at them and choose them based off of the fiscal responsibility, citizen benefit, and really say, is this really going to be the best thing versus saying, okay, we don't have the resources in-house, we're going to have to put them in the cloud. And then that allows us to be flexible and to be able to implement those systems that make most sense. As you can see, we're already undertaking some SaaS-based applications like Workday when we're replacing Banner and PeopleSoft. We have the courts. They replaced their IBM iSeries with a SaaS-based system. They're going to be able to hold virtual courts and more. So really, for 2020 and 2021, we're focusing on modernization. We're looking at security and reevaluating retention, because I had mentioned that one of the things that why we didn't go to the cloud is because we had all that legacy documents, data that we really couldn't have. We have tapes from 30 years ago just because we aren't essentially allowed to get rid of them. We're holding emails forever. So we're hoping to modernize and update those legacy applications and systems. It allows us essentially to consider going cloud first. We implemented security suites that use a little bit of this microsegmentation, or basically digital moats around systems, so that the bad guys or systems that shouldn't talk to each other don't talk to each other. We're taking this time to revisit data retention and how long we have to hold on to things. And then we're also increasing the availability of critical systems. And hopefully, with this focus on delivering the quality services through those modern platforms, as well as allowing all our IT staff to focus on one data center versus 4, we'll be able to provide better service to our citizens as well as their employees. So that pretty much hopefully covered what our plan is for 2020, 2021, some of the things that we did, and some of the thoughts that was going through our mind through this process, and the rationale behind those projects and what we did. Does anyone have any questions or need anything clarified?
I don't know if we have any questions. I still have that screen up. I don't know if we want to go to, there we go. Thank you. Is there any questions, council members? If not, what about, Councilman Neal, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. I was following most of it. My question was, with technology just moving so fast, the trade-off, of a cloud-based system compared to what you shared. And I don't know how many, if our label costs are any less if we're in a cloud-based, if we have to have somebody designated to having a system on. I have to tell you, it's almost like we're being forced into the cloud for so many things, because it's like we're moving to Big Brother even if we don't want to. But these are my concerns. Knowing how the city's systems have been breached in the past, that's where the technology piece comes in, because they're designated. They have the latest and greatest antivirus and all that kind of software. So part of me wonders, because one breach and you lose all that savings.
Yep.
So if I followed you correctly, you said we do have sort of like a hybrid model where part of our sensitive data is stored in the cloud. So if we lose anything, it may be just what we, using my limited understanding, what we didn't back up at that time.
Yeah. So let me tell you some of the problems that we have. And I wish that we were, Amazon or a retailer, or we just had Shopify and we had one platform and we put everything in that platform. But the reality is, with a city, we have over 300 virtual machines that are running doing different things. And the problem is that as you start to add on things, you can't necessarily get rid of it. And you get to a point where you might not, I'd hate to say this, but you don't necessarily know if people are using it or not, right? And you have all this legacy tech debt, right? Because you still need to care and feed for these systems that you really don't know if they're being used or not. And the problem is that they're also legacy systems. And so the bad part is that, like with Workday, having a SaaS-based application that's in the cloud and has multiple features, that's awesome because A, someone else is managing it. And number two, we know that that's the record for a lot of financial documents, accounting documents, and things like that. And it's backed up somewhere else, right? But then now the real difficult part is, okay, what were those systems that were replaced? Be able to kind of obsolete those things, shut them down, and go from there. What we're planning on doing is, while we're moving to those SaaS-based applications, what we're going to do for 2021, our objective is that we're going to start putting those things up in the cloud. The reality is that if we took all of those legacy applications, the 300 virtual machines and things that may have never been touched, it would literally have created a financial crisis on us just from a compute standpoint. And the nice thing is that we know that, like Amazon Cloud, their pricing is always going down, right? So the hope is that we can clean up some of our digital, lockers, as you call it, some of the systems that we have, that we start to then hopefully move into the cloud, and then we'll have better costs, or I guess better idea of what those things are going to cost, and then be able to kind of launch from there, and then really, slim down the number of applications that we use. And when we, reduce the number of applications that we have, we provide the ability that we don't have to move data from one system to another. We can have better visibility across employees, better visibility across our citizens, and having that, kind of data in one area, one system, just helps everyone out. So hopefully this is to get away from the, the Britney Spears and the Razor era, to get it modern, get it stable, and then hopefully that's that springboard to go on to bigger and better things. Did that answer your question, Russell?
It does. It gives me, you help me kind of understand, because I know one of the challenges when you said legacy, like in my business, we use QuickBooks.
Yep.
And I had some old computers that had Windows 7 on them. Well,
Yes.
They said, we're not going to support this anymore, but you got all this information on there. So now I can, on a much smaller scale, I can understand what you're saying.
But sir, to be completely honest with you, imagine that you stopped buying at QuickBooks 11 or something like that, and you had this old machine, and you had maybe you're running an embroidery, something like that, and you have an embroidery machine or a screen printing machine that only runs Windows XP, and you had to keep that in production, and so you did your best. It would be super easy to just reformat everything and throw everything away, but it would cost a big burden for licenses and
Exactly.
technical to leap. And so that's what we have, that old tech debt.
Okay.
That's from years ago.
Okay. No, thank you for the explanation. If I may, Chairman, I do have one other question that's related to this.
Sure.
I know there's a few cities that have reached out to like the big guys, IBM, that have these whole, pretty much like a customized smart city model that they put in that kind of creates that synergy between everything. Have you had a chance to look into any of that at all?
Yeah. So the thing is that smart city tend to be a big buzzword, and I know our previous CIO was focused on that. But at the end of the day, smart city is a great way to talk about IoT, lighting, things like that. But the problem is that some of the systems and some of the just basic things of how we're trying to store data really isn't explained by that. When you have auditing and budgeting, or maybe that they're using an old system, or maybe they're tracking the assets that are on our books, right? And the depreciation schedules maybe just in some old things. Technology and smart initiatives really doesn't address that.
Okay.
And hopefully some of the systems that we're bringing on will do that and allow us to kind of get smarter, and then be able to have the data that flows amongst systems better. Because right now our visibility is hard. We're just trying to keep the lights on, and that's kind of what we're trying to do. And make sure that the officers on the street have the information that they need to, that they're able to, do their jobs with the, as least IT problems. And, I hope we can get there, Mr. Neal.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the explanation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Does either of the interns have any questions or comments? Shelby does.
Hi, I just had a quick question about the data retention and how you decide, like, are you guys just going to get rid of like certain stuff, and what is the deciding factor for what's being discarded?
Sure. So essentially, law kind of oversees our retention schedules. We have schedules for everything. However, IT is kind of in a interesting spot. So sometimes we're the holders of data for other departments. And so sometimes people don't necessarily think about the digital waste and things like that. We can go look at our own maybe thumb drives and maybe Michael Jackson collections that we have at home. Maybe we just start accumulating this stuff, but then we don't have a good way to start saying, hey, when can I go ahead and get rid of that? Or we go and buy a new system and then we forget that IT's holding this data. Well, so as IT folks, we're like, okay, we have to make it work, but are we using it? When was the last time that we accessed this, right? And as those that we're responsible for safeguarding it, we're backing it up and things like that, and we have to really work better with our departments of saying, okay, do we still need this? We have these tapes that are maybe 30 years old. Maybe we don't even have a device that can play this thing back, but do we still need it, right? And so, you can imagine, I cleaned out my garage and was looking at my DVDs and CDs, and I'm like, I don't even have a DVD player. I don't even have a CD player anymore. And, it's harder with that with a city. So I know that we're so focused on moving forward that we forget about the digital garbage and debt that we have in the past. And that's one of the things that we're kind of trying to work with the departments and also work with law, understand what's important, what types of data do we have to retain, because we have different retentions for pieces of paper versus digital stuff. So we're working through that. So I don't have an answer for you for that, but that's a little bit of the problem. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
That's good. Anything else? Any other questions or comments? I'm sure I can get this presentation sent to me. Is that possible?
Yep.
All right, I'll make sure we have our deputy clerk here. I'll have her reach out to you, and I'd like to see if I can get that via email and then eventually get it printed out so I can present it in my presentation in December or whenever. So,
okay.
All right. Well, Lieutenant, anything else in regards to the presentation or this topic?
No, I just want to remind everyone, when you think of just body worn cameras, for example, when we got those almost 3 years ago, we almost didn't have the IT infrastructure to even support something like that, to even think about managing that internally. So we went to the cloud-based system with evidence.com, and that's where all those, potentially millions of videos are going to be housed, and they're housed off-site in the cloud storage that Axon provides. But think about those millions of videos that have to be kept for 30, 40, even sometimes indefinite. You're talking video files that are huge. They could be a couple hours long. A movie, imagine saving a movie that's 2 hours long and you have 10 officers that are on scene for 2 hours. What do you do with that? You have to be able to pull that off the cloud at some point and present that to somebody that asks, because the state, they don't care how expensive it is to manage that data. They don't care about if we want to dispose of it, because it takes a lot of money and a lot of personnel to support it. It's the law. The law tells us how long we have to retain these things, and that's tricky, and it's very expensive at times. So just to keep that in mind, 3 years ago, we didn't have body-worn cameras, and now we have, literally thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of videos, petabytes at some point. These are going to be petabytes. Who's going to manage that? How are we going to store that? How are we going to sort that? How are we going to pull that? Those are, those are some questions that we have to have, because the state requires us to do that. So technology is amazing, but it's not cheap. and it's not easy to manage. And I think this presentation kind of exposed some of those, difficulties we have with it.
It did. No, thank you too. I appreciate that. Councilman Neal, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to speak to Lieutenant's point. I was on a call today with Anthony Bolden was on there. He works for Governor DeWine. I'll just say on best policing practices coordinating throughout the state. I may have that wrong, but I can tell you from the legislative side, one of the things is all the communities are having discussions about, how to improve policing. From our side, collectively, one of the things we're doing is lobbying the federal government for more money for just this, the data storage and body cameras for, our city's police departments. Akron, we're a little bit bigger, but surprisingly, some communities are still struggling even to get the body cameras. And after what was shared here today, when they get them, they're going to have the problem of how to store it. So I can tell you, legislators from across the state are coming together so that we can lobby the federal government for more money just for that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Councilman Neal, I can't underemphasize the point at how much we appreciate the support that City Council has had over the last several years with some of these IT projects that we've been working on. Because literally a couple years ago, we were light years behind where we should have. I mean, we were vulnerable, we were at risk. We had old antiquated systems that were outdated, unsupported. I mean, we had a server that somebody threw in the trash that we were using as one of our main servers. So without your support, I mean, we wouldn't be in this position that we are. We're tenfold in a better position today when we were 2, even 3 years ago. So without City Council support, I can't thank you enough for that. And we're going to continue to move in that direction. So thank you so much.
Good, thanks. All right, anything in regards to this topic or anything else? I'm just looking. All right, well, with that, we'll move on to Captain Yohe. I do know, obviously, we're going to talk about equipment. One of the topics is he's going to address the letter that Councilman Neal sent him after our meeting 2 weeks ago in regards to one of his constituents. So, Captain.
Sure. Thanks, Donnie. I guess I'd just like to thank, Mr. Rizzo. I've communicated with him before on other matters for writing and being involved in the process here. I'll try my best to respond. I guess a lot of the letter included his personal opinions on matters, and I guess I will try to focus on facts and things, obviously, that are relevant to his comments. And of course, certainly it can include my opinion from the police department's perspective in regards to his opinions on matters. I guess, to kind of review from what we've talked about in former meetings about particularly the chemical munitions order that came through City Council. This was basically a standard order on replacement for munitions that we used operationally. We had several SWAT incidents and, of course, a riot downtown that required us to deploy these munitions, and they needed replaced because it's a valuable tool. This piece of equipment or these munitions are a valuable tool that we need to manage and mitigate risks for operational needs. So certainly the processes should be looked at. Of course, in my opinion, I think it's good that there are discussions and deliberations all the way throughout the city as we, are financially responsible to the community members of what we purchase and the processes that include. And it always, of course, has to be balanced, right, with the need to have these things operationally. In other words, we can't deliberate for 6 years waiting for things to come in that we need today. And certainly any process does take time, and we must be sensitive to not only the time it takes our city to get these things, but also for manufacturers themselves to produce or to ship products to us, so that, again, when the need comes up in the future, we have those things available to us. So for Mr. Rizzo's comments about some deliberation, yes, and I think that the process had opportunities for those deliberations. I guess the questions on increasing the time for that certainly is maybe something beyond my purview here, and better equipped to be answered by maybe council members themselves. But in specific focus on the chemical munitions there, again, this was a common practice. We've used these munitions, we use them in training, we use them operationally, and they need to be replaced. So they cost a certain amount of money that demands city council's oversight, as it should, and we have to go through this process to order that equipment. Now, concerning, I guess specific comments that Mr. Rizzo had made, I'm far from a legal expert on international law. I don't know, it feels strange commenting about what happens in the Middle East, or making comments about the 1993 Chemical Weapons Convention. I can't comment on that stuff. I can tell you what happens in the Akron Police Department. Okay, we're not shooting mustard gas or VX nerve gas or trying to asphyxiate people. These are munitions that have been around since I came on the police department. Munitions that myself and the officers have been exposed to themselves in training and operationally. And again, it's a tool that we use to mitigate issues that come up. Right. We don't rely on them to control people that want change, unless, of course, the people want to impose change by committing acts of violence or destruction of property. Obviously, this is not something that I guess Mr. Rizzo had described as American as apple pie, and that we do this all the time. It's common practice. It's not. As I said in the past, we in recent months had over 40 peaceful demonstrations. And in one of those, it turned into a riot where the munitions were needed, and we had to deploy them to use them. So it's not a frequent first thing we turn to. It's done with much careful consideration, and really is kind of a last resort effort to restore peace and to protect society. We don't use them to attack people. It's not our purpose to support white supremacy or to support any political platform. We in police work, we're not afforded we don't take sides. We're here to ensure people have the right to voice their opinion. But when in the course of those expressions things become violent, we have to manage that and protect society, protect people, protect the infrastructure of the city. And chemical munitions are one tool that we could do that. And unfortunately, maybe it's not a pleasurable experience to go through it, but I guess to any critics of this as a tool, I would say, show me a better way. We are certainly open to continue, and have previously explored new technologies, new equipment, new approaches to managing these risks and the threats of violence and presented from individuals or groups of people. And if anyone has something that could work better, I think we're all ears, basically, and we're willing to listen. But in the meantime, it's one of the best tools that we can use at this time. For example, to control a violently armed suspect in a house and get him to come out of that house so that we can safely take him into custody, or to control, hundreds of people who are, like I said, rioting, to disperse them, or to affect the rest of individuals responsible for those criminal acts. So, like I said, I could certainly answer questions, but in summary, I guess I just like to say, yes, I agree that there should be deliberation and discussion over any expenditures of significant size with the city. That's for not just the police departments, but for all branches of our community and divisions. That we should do that, and we should have the opportunity for those discussions, and we certainly welcome public input in that process, as I know the city council does. But I guess in my opinion, we should be mindful that those deliberations don't delay us from getting equipment, tools, resources that we know we need to safely and effectively do our job. And like I said a moment ago, we're always open for a better way. And I don't know what happens again in the Middle East or how these things are used, but we don't use them in direct applications to harm people. The purpose is carefully considered and used to keep our officers and our community safe. And, beyond that, like I said, I don't want to dwell too much into, personal philosophies or considerations or opinions, but I certainly, if the city council want me to interject further, I certainly can do that. If they have more specific questions about that related to Mr. Rizzo's comments in particular, I'm more than welcome to address those at further depth or into another area. So why don't we leave it there if anyone has any questions.
No, thank you, Captain. I'll see if Councilman Neal has any comments, because obviously this is one of his constituents, I believe.
Right.
Well, I want to thank Captain for explaining. Mr. Rizzo is passionate about our city, and he has a lot of information on a lot of different issues. So I had to apologize to him because I was ignorant of some of the things that he had spoke of, and I think one of the challenges that we have as council right now is that our constituents aren't able to engage us like they regularly do. And so I think we have to, whenever possible, we put in all of our legislation that emergency clause so that it's there in case we do have to pass something without 3 readings. But technically, if possible, we're to give things 3 readings so that the public does have a chance to comment. Now with this social distancing and COVID, and not everybody having the technology to get on Zoom, I know some city councils offer where citizens can actually get on Zoom and see, and get on Zoom and comment. It just makes it difficult. So I appreciate you, sharing that. I think from Mr. Rizzo's point, maybe if we had the 3 readings, he would have been able to put his comment in, earlier. So, I think going through this process, the more we can educate council, educate our constituents, we'll all be better for it. So thank you for sharing. I'll wait to the end, Mr. Chairman, because I do have something that came up that I want to share. That's a question for. Thanks.
Well,
All right.
If I can interject for 1 second, Mr. Kamer. So just to explain a little further too, we have to have an inventory, right? And it's as you can imagine, one of the difficulties in managing issues the police has to manage is it's sometimes hard to predict, right? We can't schedule how many deployments of this we'll have. I mean, I can go several months and not have a SWAT incident or a riot, or I can have 3 of them in one weekend, right? So we have to keep a reasonable balance of inventory, but just the inherent nature of what we do sometimes demands that we have processes to address how these needs come up. It's not like, I think even Mr. Rizzo commented that there was an inventory clerk who could handle this. Well, it's not like we, order 16 cogs a day here, because that's what we go through. It's not like in a regular manufacturing job. There's certainly uncertainties that make it difficult to manage that inventory. And we also have to be sensitive and fiscally responsible to the public. I can't get $6 million in chemical munitions stored either. That would be irresponsible. You know what I mean? So it's balancing those things. And of course, like Mr. Neal said, just educating everyone just about the nature of police work and how it presents challenges to such things is the ordering that may at times demand that we maybe move a little faster than we would on ordering, mowers for the city services or some type of other more easily predictable, disposables or products that the city might order in other places, just because, again, of the nature of how we use them. So I just want to kind of interject that a little bit in explaining some of the difficulties there too, and why we need to balance it. Yeah, 3 readings. If in fact those 3 readings don't cost us from having to protect someone or protect the city, or managing to find a process that it also allows us to operate as we have. So thank you.
Right.
That.
All right. And before I go to Councilwoman Connor, I just want to read the first paragraph in Mr. Rizzo's letter, and I'll speak of it as a legislator also. Is it says it would just be disappointing if City Council had rushed through another in its so-called emergency measures to provide tear gas and pepper spray for Akron Police Department that apparently is in dire need of an inventory cleared. Like Councilman Neal stated earlier, some of these come to us and they're emergency measures. And then, like you said, Captain, we don't know what's going to happen in the city. If it's in regards to riots or any kind of hostage situations or anything in regards to like a large shopping center or a mall or anything like that might have that kind of situation. So as a legislator, sometimes we do have to suspend the rules and vote these through immediately. Like you mentioned, the mowers, if we have a couple city mowers that break down and the public service department brings in something in regards to trying to purchase a couple mowers so we can continue doing the job, sometimes we got to suspend the rules and move forward because we still got to mow grass. I know Councilman Neal and Sharon Connor will testify to this. I mean, it's a prime example throughout the city. We'll have large sewer main breaks, especially downtown, and we'll have to get those repaired within hours, and then we got to pay the contractor, and a lot of times we do have to suspend the rules. So but yeah, I do wish on like this matter, I believe our stockpile was really low. It would have been nicer if we did have a nice large amount where we could have sat back and said, okay, let's take a week and really digest this and discuss it and everything like that. But this is one of those things. I believe there was a few instances back in June or July, we were told that we used some of these non-lethal agents, and that kind of like brought our stockpile down. So
yes.
With that, Councilwoman Connor, go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to piggyback on the comments that have been said. The education from these committees and these reimagining sessions has been great, especially for me and for the average person. And I would certainly encourage anyone from the general public to listen in on all of these, because it's just opening up a whole system that the average person just isn't aware of. And I'm certainly appreciative of our police officers' time and their work in bringing that information forward. I think it's been a great asset for all of us.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I appreciate that. Moving along, the interns, any questions or comments in regards to Captain Yowie and the letter he shared? No? Okay. With that, I guess we're almost towards the end. I'll go ahead and see Councilman Neal did have some other stuff. And then if we have any suggestions for our next meeting, please offer them.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. My question is in regards to, as we move into this, you showed the Razor phone, which was, I think you said 2G. As we move into 5G, there's different opinions. Of course, it's going to allow us to move into that true Jetson age. Autonomous, is proper term, autonomous cars. Nobody's in the car, nobody's in the truck, all this stuff that takes place. And some of the information I've read has talked about we may not even be using tear gas anymore, because you could even use frequencies. And one of the concerns is that just as it could be used, having the safety measures on these 5G small cell towers that proliferate our city now, because the distance can't be as far, and those being able to be hacked and used in a negative way. I know some of this stuff sometimes, because it's so fresh, don't want to talk about it, but because of some of the stuff I've read, I think we do need to talk about it, at least understand what we're getting into. And so I don't know if I'm making myself, if what's in my head is coming out properly, but 5G with all of its benefits has some challenges. And if you'd like to, maybe at another time. Yeah, unmute.
I think you're on mute.
I was going
Was
to
that
say, is
question
this for me or Yui?
Oh, whoever can answer, sir.
Engelbert? I think that's you.
Well, you know what's funny is that I actually know a person that was that selling some product at Redstone where they had a lot of that type of technology. You know, I think that the 5G is something that has to be, you know, cleared by the FCC. It has to be, you know, safe, even if we can't be, you know, changing, you know, the milliwatts that things are actually like, you know, sending out those waves. I really, you know, I hope that we actually can't take that technology, and I know what you're talking about, you know, being able to weaponize it, you know, and I hope that's, you know, the FCC there, that's kind of taking care of it, because it is kind of a different technology. And I can tell you that, you know, it's almost like saying, hey, can I drive around and hack everyone's microwaves and fire them off at the same time and have them go and blast? I think that that's actually safe. You know, I know that we're already talking about 5G, but they're already talking about 6G. The bad part is that, you know, I think that as technologists, we're trusting the regulators, as well as the federal government, to make sure that the max you know, effectiveness of these wavelengths are safe for humans. And you know, I can't really address the ability to weaponize it, but I just pray that you know, federal government, doctors, things like that are making sure that they aren't turned up at those types of levels. But you know, I can see that would be a concern.
Because this goes back to the question 2 weeks ago, Lieutenant Farr, about, you know, being able to work. Is it because 5G is being pushed by our cell phone companies? It seems like there needs to be some type of relationship with our safety forces. One, for being able to, you know, with COVID, we see that they can do the mapping to identify who's in a certain area, but to make sure that those safety measures are there, or if a city has to shut something down or override them, that there needs to be some type of communication and for lack of a better term, best practice protocol put in place now for whatever case scenarios can take place. If it be the case where, you know, hey, if we got this technology, Amber Alert, we can pull that stuff together to get certain information, or like when we had the one shooting, well, you pick one, you know, to be able to say who was in that area, or in case it gets to where we find people are hacking, you know, the city we can override something and shut it down. So that's just, I mean, these are conversations, like I said, because we don't know, sometimes you don't know what question to ask specifically, but you know, we have to have a better understanding of what we have now.
So one benefit, I'm not sure if you're aware of, Mr. Neal, but a benefit that we are actually afforded by a lot of the carriers, 4G, 5G, is the ability to utilize in a disaster scenario. We're not talking about the weaponization, but you know, if we had 9/11 that would happen in Akron, that they're able to prioritize and preempt all other traffic above you know, any other you know, citizens and things like that. So I'm not sure about the partner level perspective of, you know, being able to be notified if systems were hacked, but I can tell you that they're actually good partners, and they will prioritize our safety forces first, so that they can communicate, they can stay out in the field. Not only that, do we have the, you know, redundant radio systems, and keep our you know, officers talking when they need to most. And I can't talk for a lot of other things, but I appreciate the carriers' moves and how they support our law enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So moving forward, this is the only piece of paper I don't have in front of me, but I believe our next meeting is November 4th. Sarah, is that correct? Can you just double check for me? I believe it is November 4th at 5 p.m.
Yes, November 4th.
All right, thank you. So I know we have the interns and they're involved in the community and everything. And I like to see if they have any suggestions or topics they want to be discussed. They don't have to answer right now, but so on November 5th, I'll get with the captain and the lieutenant. And if the council members, if you have any topics under equipment and technology, let me know. So I can reach out to the captain and lieutenant. We can set an agenda. So before we adjourn, anything else from anyone? All right. And like I said, I appreciate the interns joining us. And if they have anything to add, you have my email address. You have all of our email addresses. Email me, and whatever topics under technology and equipment you want to discuss, let us know. So yeah, moving forward, I'll reach out to you two and we'll figure out a agenda for November 4th, and we'll go from there. So can I get, if nothing else come before us, looking to make sure, and can I get a motion for adjournment?
So move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay. Well, thanks everyone. I appreciate it. Have a good week.
Thank you.
And I'll see you on November 4th.